Hello, I am back today, and wanted to go into a little bit more detail about how Highcaster works, how the game engine works. I've seen a few requests about this. The core loop of the game is described in the Kickstarter. There are a couple of actual plays where you can watch the game in full motion, and I put up a post that gives an example of gameplay. An update on the Kickstarter, but I think it's probably due time for just to go into the mechanics of it, as it is a very interesting system. I think compared to others, it's very different, especially in the fantasy genre. So I wanted to spend a few minutes today talking about the game system, and I'm going to share this video on the Kickstarter page as well, so the backers can see it. I'm not sure that all of the backers follow me. But if you are a backer, follow me. I'm on Facebook and Twitter, Grey Author, GREY. Before I get into that, though, I do want to say thank you very much. So this has been a very exciting campaign. I think I've mentioned that Highcaster is pretty near and dear to my heart. This is a personal project for me. All my projects are personal, but this one really goes way back and goes pretty deep. So I really appreciate the support that I'm getting from the community on the project, and I'm really hoping that you'll love the game just as much as that I do. So hopefully you will, and I think that we're coming quite along. We are past the 5,000 goal, which means you will be getting the SRD of the caster system, so you'll be able to run your own games using the system and create your own stuff. So that's very exciting. I want the caster system to be out there. I want other people to use it for other things, so that there's an alternative to D20, and make your games more narrative, and that's the whole goal here. So, what do I want to? And then $10,000. We're gonna, if we reach that goal, we will put in a whole section in the core book about how to adapt D20 games to the caster system. So it'll kind of give you a toolkit to be able to do that easily. But the SRD as it stands, is enough really to go with. I've used it for D&D and it works fine. So, yeah. Anyway, let's get back to what the caster system is in the context of Highcaster, which is the purpose of this. I try to fit everything on one screen here, so I'm sorry if it's hard to see. You'll see a character sheet for our chronicler, who is actually featured in the game quite a bit, and he does all the introductions for the stories, and that's Julius Lorado, who is a Hydoni chronicler historian. So I made him a character for the fun of it. So that's we have that character. Note that these are beta character sheets. There are a few problems with these sheets. These aren't the final ones. I'm actually going to be releasing new sheets here in the next, hopefully in the next week or so, because I have personally been frustrated with them, so I'm sure you have been as well, but we're working on it. Also, you'll see here owlbear.rodeo, which is a virtual tabletop, which is a really cool free virtual tabletop I highly recommend. You can run Highcaster on it because it has a very important feature, which is that you can do notes, which index cards are a key feature to keeping your game organized in Highcaster, and you can do that on Owlbear. So I highly recommend this platform. It's really cool. I use it a lot. So that's my plug there. Anyway, let's take Julius through a situation here. I already picked on Julius during my update, so let's give him another scenario. Since he's a chronicler, it's kind of difficult to put him into anything all that dangerous, but let's say that he let's say for the sake of this session, he is in a caravan on his way from one village to another, and he's supposed to be the protected elite. He's not a warren, he's a chronicler, and so he will stay safe in his wagon while all of the armed warrens are guarding him. Now, let's say that they have a lot of guards here because this area has been crawling with bandits. So we'll do a typical bandit attack on a camp. On a caravan. So a pretty simple scenario. If I were running this game, or if I were running this session, I would probably start, just by introducing a threat. Now, the chronicler section has a lot of guidelines on doing this, but when threats should be used often and frequently, and thrown to completely change the story up. I actually consider it is one of the chronicler moves, so I consider it a key move as a chronicler, as a game master. So whenever the story stagnates, or something needs to change, or everybody's looking at you waiting to know what's going to happen next, that's a good time to introduce a threat. Threats are not necessarily bad guys or monsters. They can be, and they often are, but they are not necessarily that. A threat is something that is getting in the way of what your characters want. So it can be anything, really, that does that. It could be a dog that is causing too much noise and distracting the caravan. It could be bad weather. It could be bandits attacking. And you'll find that in Highcaster, you are less concerned about the specific actions that the bandits or the monsters are doing, and more about what the overall threat is that needs to be resolved. Threats happen in stages, so you can have a single stage threat, which is basically you resolve that threat through die roll, and then it's gone. It's been subdued. But there could be multiple stage threats where you have to do more than one thing in order to resolve that threat, and those can be 6 or more stages depending on how severe or detailed the threat is. And there can be multiple simultaneous threats, and so that will force the players to have to decide what they're going to confront. The key element about threats is that a player cannot roll the die unless they are confronting a threat. So if there's no threat to confront, they can't make a move. And that always pushes the players to decide how they want to move forward. So if they want to do something, but there's no way to do it, they may need to pay a favor in order to introduce a threat of their own, or they can accept a favor and basically pay and get the GM or the chronicler to pay them to introduce an escalated threat or escalate an existing threat. So threats are a way of focusing gameplay on what is important to the table. Now, if you're doing something that isn't against a threat, it's not relevant to the story. That's the idea. So if you want it to be relevant to the story, you need to pay for it, or the story needs to get more complicated and interesting. And so that's the rationale behind that. So you'll run into that sometimes, where somebody will try to go and attack or confront a threat that's already been subdued, so it's not active anymore, or they'll want to do something and there's no threat for that. In those cases, you actually are bartering a bit for the story, because if they go after something where there isn't an existing threat, then it's not going to advance the story at all, beating a dead horse. But if they want to, then either the story needs to escalate, or they need to pay for it, introduce a change in some way. So that's kind of like the basic mechanics around threats. Threats do not need to be visualized. You don't necessarily need to write them down on an index card and put them on the table. But it helps, especially if there are a lot of threats, and it actually helps kind of frame the scene a bit for the players, so that they can see clearly what they need to focus on and what they shouldn't. And it's a way of communicating without having to go into details. So in this case, I'm going to add a note here saying that I'm hesitating here because there's a number of ways to do this, but he's on a caravan in his wagon. So I'm going to put sounds of battle here as a threat. Can't really see it on this tiny note. There. So sounds of battle is a threat, and we'll put that on the board. So what I would do in this situation is I'd put this threat down and say, yeah, you hear some fighting coming from the head of the caravan. What do you want to do? And if Julius has lots of choices at this point, and one of them is to do nothing. Let's say he does that. He's like, well, you know what? The Warren are out there. They can take care of battle. I'm just going to stay in here safe. And I might even punctuate that as a chronicler and say, yeah, the Warren outside is like, yeah, stay here, Chronicler Lorado. We are taking care of these bandits. Stay right here. Don't move. Right. So in that case, I mean, the story is just kind of going to keep going. It's like, okay. However, I as a chronicler, since this threat wasn't confronted right away, I have a move where I can escalate the threat. And this is a good thing to do, especially if there are a lot of threats in play, where you start escalating one threat that's not getting attention so that they have to kind of force themselves over there to stop that from escalating. And while they're doing that, this one escalates, and you can kind of play this sort of shell game that you see in epic adventures where it's like, there's too many decisions to make. You are dealing with dilemmas in that case. It's like, well, if I don't do that, that's going to get worse. But if I do that, then this will get worse. And that kind of creates hard choices for the players. So it's really great to introduce more threats. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Instead of escalating the sounds of battle, because what I would do if I were to escalate it, I would say, okay, the sounds of battle are now really close. And when you look out your wagon window, you can see one of the guards get impaled with a large sword. And now the battle's sort of more imminent and on your doorstep. So, sorry, I got distracted. I should have put that away. Anyway, so that's one way to escalate. But instead of escalating it, I'm going to add another threat just to make things more interesting. Oh, I can zoom in. I should do that. So let's call this threat. No, it's not gonna let me. There we go. We'll call this threat storm. Okay. There is suddenly a massive rainstorm. That would have been better if I had prepped for this and said, like, starting out the caravan, the clouds were closing in, and maybe give some hint. But yeah, this is like out of the blue, some massive storm, and that means then torrential rain, mud, poor visibility. So this is a threat, and it's going to complicate things, and it might escalate if it's not dealt with. And you say, well, Chris, how do you deal with a storm? Well, there's lots of ways to deal with a storm. Maybe maybe Julius decides to take some cloth from the storage, like say there's some chest in there, and he grabs some cloth and he wants to leave the wagon for safety, but he uses the cloth to protect himself from the rain, right? That would actually be confronting the storm threat. But let's say instead he wants to stay inside. I might need to escalate the storm threat, and maybe escalating it means there's going to be a flood, and so he has to get out. Or if he doesn't, he's going to be stuck in this wagon that's going to get swept away. So there's lots of ways to play this. But Julius is a chronicler. He is not interested in getting wet, and he is not interested in fighting. So he has decided to stay put, looking at the rain, wondering what he's going to do. Right. So now I'm getting kind of a passive player. As a GM, I would be like, oh no, they're not doing anything. But that's okay, because Highcaster gives you the tools to escalate. And so at some point he's going to have to do something, which is fine that he's not doing something. That's his character. Character wouldn't do anything in this case. So I've got to kind of compel him and kind of give him choices. So we have a threat that's a storm. I'm going to go ahead and escalate this threat and say the storm is causing a flood. And when I escalate threats at the table, I just add to the note that I've already put in. So storm is causing a flood. This has escalated. So now I would tell him the wagon is dislodged and you feel yourself being swept away. And as it's pivoting, you can see the sounds of battle. The battle has arrived. And so now you see somebody getting throttled, one of the warriors getting throttled by these bandits. It gets cut open right in front of you as you're pivoting, and you just see the battle closing in on you. So I'm going to say battle is closing in. And that means then what now what do you do? He has to do something because not only is the wagon not being picked up by rushing water, but when the wagon pivots, he sees that this battle's coming towards him. So, he's seeing people getting knocked down and cut up, and you could describe that in part of this. So the narrative is moving forward, even though the player isn't. And that's one key point on Highcaster. The story keeps going with or without the players, and the players are eventually going to have to do something about it because these are going to continue to escalate until something is done, until they are confronted and subdued. So, but he's being intransigent. So what I'm going to do? I'm going to introduce another threat. I'm going to say this is bad. This is bad. The Warren are fleeing. So now, the people of the Warren, these soldiers, these guards are supposed to protect them, are running away. They are getting overwhelmed by bandits. Have you noticed that none of the threats are bandits? I don't actually have that threat on the table yet. It's a threat. It's out there, but it's actually not directly affecting Julius yet. It's sort of the environment. At some point, I'm going to introduce a bandit threat because the bandit is directly threatening Julius. But right now, there's all these circumstantial things happening around Julius. But the Warren are fleeing. The guards are like, they're getting cut down, and now they're running. They weren't hired for this. They were just supposed to take a caravan from village to village. They're not supposed to, risk their lives. That's not what they had. That's not what they signed up for. Even that's what they signed up for. But that's not what they signed up for. So now, Julius is watching his protection go away, and you know what? The wagon is still being washed away. I haven't escalated it yet beyond that, but that's happening. And the battle's closing in. What do you do? So you notice that even though the player hasn't done anything, the story continues to escalate. And that is making things interesting. And the player's got to be like, whoa, and even though they haven't actually made a move, they're engaged and they're active, And so even a passive player is going to be active because of the way the structure works. So now Julius has got to do something, okay? He's in a bad bind. Let's look at the character sheet. See if I can find the character sheet. It's one of these mini windows. All right, so it's that's my dog. Sorry. So anyway, what does he do? What does he do? All right, so I find the player. I'm going to kind of put on my different hat here at this point. I was like, I am going to. Here's an idea. This is an interesting idea. He has, because of his heritage, he's immortal. He has the talent that when he attempts to mimic a vocal sound from another creature to confront a threat, it gives me an idea. It's not something I would do normally, but when you look at your character sheet, you might get inspired with some ideas. So what he's going to do is he's going to call out and act like he's a commanding officer calling in for reinforcements. And he's going to say, fall back. Unit cavalry is en route, from the wagon to make the bandits think that there are reinforcements coming. That's actually a pretty good idea. All right, so he's going to make a move. Which threat is he confronting? Is he confronting the fact that the wagon is being dislodged and rushed down in a flood? Is he confronting the fact that the Warren are fleeing, or is he confronting the battle is closing in? Well, it could be battle is closing in and Warren are fleeing. It could be either one, but you have to look at the intent. What is he trying to do? He is trying to trick the bandits into thinking that there are people coming. So he's really confronting the battle. So that's the threat he's confronting. And then which move? Virtue, courage, or prestige? I don't have the list of moves out here, but really he's trying to navigate others. So this is a prestige roll. He's trying to use influence to change the minds of these bandits. So it's a prestige move. The moves could be different. Like if he was, the same action could be, if he was telling the truth, that might be virtue because he's trying to embolden, but he's not. He's lying, and he's just trying to navigate others. He's trying to get them tricked. So what does that mean? Well, we're going to roll against battles closing in. He needs to roll a d20, and he needs to roll a 10 or more to subdue that threat. Notice these are all single stage threats, which means that he only has to subdue it once and the threat is taken care of. So if that's the case, we have a d20. Now, I've said that this is a prestige roll. Julius's prestige is a D6. So he also can choose to use one of his disciplines. And that means that he would spend either a D4, a D6, or a D8 on one of his disciplines. And if that discipline uses all 3 dice, he can't use that anymore. So right now he hasn't spent any. So he can look at his disciplines and say, okay, well, I'm going to use Oratin, which is use my words to change someone's mind or the tone of the situation. That fits here perfectly. Now, he doesn't have to use this, but he wants to in this case because he wants to just knock these bandits out. So since this is a scenario, let's say he uses the D8. So he's going to spend the D8 die. So that means he can't use this. He can use this discipline if he wants 2 more times until he rests, and then he recovers 1 of those dice. He'll have to rest 3 times to recover all 3. So there is kind of some issues there on spending. So he'll use that. He also gets a D6 because he's using his mortal voice. And he gets and that's his talent die. Talent die is always D6. And then he gets his D6 from the prestige. So why don't we go back to the dice tray here. We're going to roll the discipline die. He's spending an 8 for his oration. We're going to roll his talent die and his prestige die. So the highest one is 7. That came from his discipline. So, the fact that he used his discipline means he got a really high score. Now we'll roll the d20. So that was almost an 18. Oh, you know what? The graphic is wrong. It says 16, so we'll go with that. The graphic says 5, but it is a 16 according to the computer. So yeah, 16 plus 7, that is over 20. That is a critical success. So that means that he is going to subdue this threat. Battle is closing in. Also means that he gets a favor because he rolled a 20 or more. So he gets more currency that he can use. And it means he gets narrative control. So he decides what happens. Since this is a 1-stage threat, he can really just say what the bandits do. He can tell me what happens. And if it was a 2-stage threat, he would have resolved one of the stages, and so he wouldn't have narrative control over the battle because the battle was still in play. So the rule is you can only have narrative control over something that is no longer in play. But this is no longer in play. He resolved it. So, we'll put that in the trash can. Battle is closed. That threat is subdued. So, Julius, what happened? Well, they hear me loud and clear, and they look up over the ridge, and one of the bandits says, "No, they're coming!" And then they run. Okay, the bandits are no longer attacking. That creates a sort of, that resolution kind of creates a what's the word? Domino effect. So that now some other threats aren't threats anymore. The Warren are fleeing. Well, since there aren't any bandits, doesn't matter if they flee, right? So, they may or may not come back, but the fact that they're fleeing is no longer a threat. The storm is causing a flood. Well, that's still a threat. And we're not done yet because he did not resolve that. So now, because he was focused on the bandits and he made his move against the bandits, I can escalate storm is causing a flood. And this has already escalated once. So now what we're going to do is now the wagon is a boat. We'll just say that as a threat. You can have fun with names of threats. A boat. Oh man, I messed it up. Is a boat. Okay, so then as chronicler I would say, all right, so great, bandits are running, but now you hear as the wagon has tipped over and is now rushing down rapids that was once a trail, and you are in a boat, ridiculously fast, going down, hitting rocks, and the wagon is sort of dismantling as it goes. Bam, 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 and it's toppling and turning. This is not a good situation. You do not want to be in this wagon. What do you do? Well, he has to do something. So, what we're going to do is look at the character sheet again and say, okay, well, I am going to jump out of the wagon. Okay, this is Julius Lorado. He's a chronicler. I'm not thinking he's like very fit or firm or whatever. This is probably not easy for him. And he really doesn't have any talents or disciplines that will help him here. So he really just can roll a d20 plus his humor. In this case, he's protecting himself. So I would call that a virtue. And that's kind of scratchy ground, because you could say, oh well, I'm actually just selfishly wanting to steal. I don't know. I can't think of a selfish way to do that. It's going to be protect. There are situations in which more than one humor will apply, so you have to ask about the intent. Why are you jumping out of the wagon? Well, I'm jumping out of the wagon so I don't die. Right. Well, that's protect. Okay, so you're going to roll protect, but it's going to be a straight roll because he has no disciplines or talents that will really apply here. So his his virtue is a D8, which is good. And then, we'll roll a D8. So you got 5, and then he'll roll the D20, and another really good roll. So he got a 21. Oh, you know what? That last number was a 5 because it's totaling all of the dice. Well, anyway, that ship has sailed. So is the wagon. So good, he got another crit success. If this had been another stat, maybe not. But anyway, I digress. So we're going to resolve this in just the same way. Wagon's about you get another favor. What happens? And then Julius will say, well, I leap out of the wagon and it gets carried off into the forest, and I go tumbling into the mud, and I stand up and I look really proud of myself. And I look over at the guards who aren't fleeing anymore, and I give them just a disappointed look, and I go, should have hired better. End scene. So that's it. That's basically how the rules work. It could go in different ways. Had he not rolled well on that last roll, if he had gotten a 9 or less, then I would have asked him to wax the die, which would mean add a point here. And when you get all the way to the end, then you have maxed out this die. And once you have maxed out all of the dice, you can actually pick another discipline. And then these all start at D4, and then you start over, but you have additional discipline. So that's cool. I may have taken a harm to his virtue in that case, because maybe he got embarrassed. Like if he had rolled poorly, I would have said, well, how did that make you feel? And he said, well, I'm embarrassed. Then I would have taken a harm to his prestige because he looked bad. And if he ends up with 3 harm on prestige, he can no longer use the prestige die until he recovers. So that's it in a nutshell. That's sort of how the game works. I think Julius made it out just fine and had some words to say for the commanders of his guards. That's it. Stay tuned. I will have some more. I want to talk about how the the solo RPG part works, and I will do that shortly. So thanks. Talk soon. Let me know if you have questions. I'll stay on Facebook a bit and Twitch, so if you want to type in your questions, I will be there. See you later.